Today in the show we're going to be continuing the Lezhin Recap. So in Darkhaven last time, as you may remember, we finished off with a dead body falling on the stage. Well, this entire recap is basically dealing with the aftermath of that. Naturally. Since the dead body fell on the stage with Simon performing, naturally everything around this is affecting Simon. The police are considering Simon as a prime suspect. His agency are no longer using Simon for sexual favors, which means they're considering just getting rid of him. And there's also the fact that Connor was at the festival and he wanted to run to try and comfort Simon, but Veronica, Connor's girlfriend, stopped him. All of the things that Simon knows about cause him to peak and basically take what looks like heroin and pass out as he imagines Connor next to him. And then after this, we finally get a rundown of what this gang actually is. So they're called the WAF, W-A-F, and that stands for Whites and Freedom. There are roughly 500 active members of the gang, but the gang operate off of a website that has the same name. Now there are thousands of users of this website, and these people are considered supporters of the WAF. These people are also racist and homophobic and fully support the murderous intent of the gang's movement. We then catch up to Simon what he's doing now. Kiev is there and he was like, when I came here, I found you passed out on the floor. And Simon is just like, yeah, whatever, that happens sometimes. Kiev basically explains that the agency won't be using him for quite some time. So now would be a good opportunity to go into rehab. And Simon actually considers this for like 2 seconds until a male prostitute that he has dressed up as Connor turns up. And then Kiev, as he's leaving, realizes that he was just a stand-in for Connor. So he gets hurt for all of 2 seconds, but then he joins in these two in the sexy sex. And it turns into a threesome, and it was kind of out of nowhere, but... And then we finally get to find out how Connor and Veronica met. So it turns out after Connor's hands were crushed, Veronica was always visiting him in the hospital because she was a big fan of Darkhaven. He told her from the beginning that he was gay, but she just kind of ignored this and kept going to see him in the hospital. She paid for all of his hospital bills, and the two of them just began to get closer and closer until one night Connor got super drunk and ended up sleeping with her. This causes him to get into his head that he can stop being gay if he stays with Veronica. So he goes to his parents, he comes clean about his and Simon's relationship, but also introduces them to Veronica. His mother then takes him to the local Korean church and has him, in the eyes of God, renounce his relationship with Simon, renounce his homosexuality, and basically do a whole pray the gay away thing. What he's doing is he's saying that his entire relationship, all of his happy memories with Simon, should have never happened. But then we skip forward in time to just after the beer festival and we see Connor breaking up with Veronica. Connor then agonizes if he should meet up with Simon or not, but then he decides, you know what, I am gonna meet up with him and I'll get his number off of Mona. But then the detectives on the dead body case and on the WAF case turn up. They begin to question him and basically are like, no matter what, we're going to be locking up Simon. Until eventually Connor has had enough of all of this. He turns around and says, look, when my hands were crushed, the police refused to do anything about it. You told me that even if you did lock someone up, the rest of the gang would just come after my family. So there was no point in you doing anything. Now, because it's a white person under attack, a white person that's been killed, you're super interested. Let's be frank. You don't care who you lock up, you just need to lock someone up. So it causes an end to this media outrage. You don't care who's guilty, you don't care who's innocent, I refuse to comply, get out of my house. There's also a bunch of programs on TV accusing Simon of being gay, which he is, but obviously the public don't know that. So his agency is planning to sue these programs. And then out of nowhere, Simon gets a message from an unknown number, and in this message is a picture of a man and it says, found him. So we then have a scene with Peter, the old head bully and now a member of the WAF. He's talking on the phone about a murder he just did. He hangs up the phone when he goes in his house because he quickly realizes something is not right. Then out of nowhere, the killer from the previous chapter turns up, begins to beat up Peter, and says if you comply, nothing bad will happen to you. However, Peter fights back and this causes this killer to pin him down and stab out Peter's eyes. We then go to a scene with Mona and Connor, and the two of them are just chatting when one of Mona's friends turns up, and this is when Mona reveals that the three of them are going to break into Simon's apartment to see him. And this is where we're gonna end this chapter and move on to All About Lust. All About Lust starts off with sexy sex, and then the two boys go out to meet Go. Now Go is actually one of Sujin's friends, the friend that we met in the last recap. Sujin actually has class, which leaves Jiyeon and Go alone. And basically this whole part turns into this psychological test by Go, just trying to like test what type of person that Jiyeon is, see if he's okay to be with Sujin, but long story short, Jiyeon passes, but Go does let one thing leak. He lets leak that when Go and Sujin first met, Sujin was crying. So when Sujin comes back, he actually says to Jiyeon, you know, you don't need to ask him about my past, I'm more than happy to talk about my past. So Jiyeon outright asks, okay, then why were you crying when you first met Go? And then this panel happens, and I laughed for like a solid 2 minutes when I read this. Basically, he was crying because he was very confused about his sexual identity because it was the first time he had a crush on a boy. This boy was not Go. We then go to a flashback that fluffs this out a little bit more. Basically, Go and Sujin had been talking online for quite some time. Then one day the two of them meet up at a cafe. It's here that they realize for the first time there's actually an age difference between them. But when they introduced themselves, they both said they were in their second year. Neither of them realized that Go was in the second year of high school and Sujin was in the second year of middle school. Then Sujin begins to cry, basically begging Go to listen to him and listen to all of his issues, and Go agrees to do so after calming him down a little bit. Basically, Sujin had a crush on a boy, and he kind of went out of his way to see this boy but not to interact with him, until one day this boy actually approaches Sujin to be his friend, and he buys him a drink. And now because of this, Sujin feels kind of guilty for having the feelings towards this boy that he does because he knows nothing can become of it. And Sujin basically says to Go, does this feeling of guilt ever go away? And Go is like, well, when it comes to my own sexual identity, I just kind of go with the flow. But you know what? If you ever need someone to listen to you, I'm always here. And after this, that's exactly what happens for several years. And he vented and he vented and he vented until eventually he met Jiyeon. I think that this would result in Jiyeon becoming all lovey-dovey, or he actually becomes a little bit jealous of Go because he's like, okay, he knows so much about my boyfriend and I know next to nothing because Sujin hates talking about his past. The two boys eventually have a bath together. Jiyeon admits everything to Sujin and Sujin is just like, it's whatever, you know what? We'll get to know each other a lot more in time. The two boys then go to have sexy sex, but then they stop because they realize they don't have a condom. And then Sujin realizes he does have a condom, so they do have sexy sex after all. And now on to Dolphin Ferry. This whole part starts off with Changyong as a dolphin playing with Mokwa in the water. Then when the two boys get out of the water as humans, they go and take a shower and have sexy sex. They then go to Changyong's house and the whole thing is explained. More specifically, it's explained to a montage of them having sex, so this is like heavily censored. So Changyong was actually born in an aquarium and they treated him really, really nicely there. So one day when he was let out into the wild, he never really left the shore until eventually found himself beached. And then when he was beached, he was a human. As a human, he had an ID and he was already a part of human society and everything, so he just kept living on land. He kept living on land because he really did love all of his trainers at the aquarium. He loved everyone he worked with, but by the time he came back to land, the aquarium had gone. Reno eventually turns up and explains a similar thing happened to him, but he was actually caught in a net, and he's not exactly a fan of humans because of this whole traumatic experience. Reno then points out, as much as the two of them have human forms, they are very much still dolphins at heart. And as a result, the only reason that Changyong is interested in Mokwa is because Mokwa provides food and sex. And Changyong doesn't deny this. Mokwa then goes home feeling a little bit depressed. And then he does a whole bunch of research on dolphins. And then he goes to see if he's been paid yet so he can replace his phone that was in his pocket when he was pushed into the pool. And then he realizes he hasn't been paid yet, so he goes to a payphone, goes to call the company to be like, hey, where's my pay at? And who should answer but his old manager that he specifically didn't want to speak to. That's where we're going to be ending Dolphin Ferry for now. So all three of these stories are kind of hitting a bit more of a constant beat now. We have All About Lust, which is basically championing emotions now. We have Dark Haven, which is so good in terms of story. So good. I wish it would be a little bit faster, a little bit more punchy, but it's still so good. And then we have Dolphin Ferry, which is just doing its own thing. It's super unique. You wouldn't find anything like this anywhere else. The only place you can read it is Lezhin. So out of all three of these, I would definitely recommend Dark Haven first, All About Lust second, and Dolphin Ferry third, but at the same time, I love all three of them. Now it's time for the giveaway. Like always, what you have to do is leave a comment down below letting me know which one of these 3 comics you like the most. You also have to have an account on Lezhin's website, and you have to follow Lezhin on Twitter. You also have to be subscribed to this YouTube channel and thumbs up this video. If you do all of those things, I will be contacting you personally if you've won the giveaway to tell you if you've won some coins for you to spend on Lezhin.
It's super effective!
Okay guys, that is it for today, so don't forget to enter the giveaway. Also don't forget to thumbs up, subscribe, do all of my social links, and I will see you next time. Also check out my Patreon. Patreon's super sexy. If you're not a Patreon, mildly sexy.